Today we're going to continue with another solid scan. This one's called the Classic Long Scan, and it's based on stock picking methods from a man named Gary Smith. If you are familiar with TheStreet.com, he's a really prominent person on that website. But essentially, he came up with a method for picking stocks that essentially what you're looking at is that the closing price over a 5 day period has increased by at least $1. And what you're also looking for is a really strong volume to complement that. And what he says, that's an indicator that you have a really good stock to pick, right, for long trading. So what we're going to do is try to translate that into a scan. And to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to define a strong volume as at least 50% increase, and we're going to define the closing price by at least $1 as 4%, but we're going to keep it within a range, a short range of 4 to 6%. So let's go ahead and get started. So what we're going to start off with is we're going to have our type as stock, but we're actually going to edit some of the volume information since volume is pretty important in this particular stock. So we're actually going to look at today's volume, and we're going to look at it over a longer period of time. Instead of 20 days, we'll look over 50 days, and we actually want to set the threshold a little bit higher, so we're going to put it at 50,000. Now, I like to filter out some other information, so personally, for the purpose of this, I like to look at US stocks, and I don't really care for stocks that are under $1, so I'm going to put it greater than $1, and just to make things clean, I like to set an upper limit, so we'll set it at 250. So any stocks that for one stock is, if it's over 250, it's not going to pop up. All right, so now let's go ahead and jump into this particular scan and how we write this out. So we already set up the volume. We already set that the type is going to be a stock. The first thing that we want to set up now is we want to set up the volume. So we want today's volume to be greater than or equal to the average volume over a 50-day period times 50%. So basically we want, like I said, today's volume, we want it to be greater than, we want it to be at least 50% greater than the volume over a 50-day average. So to do that, today's volume, and we're going to do greater than or equal to today's, and it's kind of backwards the way you write it out, but it's the simple moving average over a 50-day period. And what are we focused on? We're focused on volume, right? And we want to see not just that it's greater than the average of 50 over 50 days, but we want to see that it's greater than that average over 50 days times 50%. So we want it to be 50% greater. So that is an indicator that we want a really strong volume. Okay. Next line is going to be on actually the rest of the lines are going to be on the closing price. So very simply, we want to set a range. So we want today's closing price to be greater than yesterday's closing price. And this is our lower limit. So we want it, like I said, between 4 and 6%. So our lower limit is going to be times 1.04. And we also want today's close to be less than yesterday's close at times 0.06. Okay, and I forgot to multiply here. All right, and so those are our limits. And the last thing we want to do is set a max limit. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do today's close once again. We want it to be greater than yesterday's max, right? So, and we want that max over a 5-day period. Like I said, we want to see that the max price keeps getting we want to see that the max price keeps getting beaten, right? So we want to see that the price keeps going up each day. So the max over 5 days, and we're looking at the closing price. We want to see that for today, it's beaten yesterday's max over the 5-day period, right? And so that's how we set up this scan. I know it sounds a little like not, it doesn't sound intuitive to have yesterday's, but then have it over a 5 day period. But you'll see in the results what that this is actually how you code for looking at the max over a 5 day period starting yesterday. All right, and so we are going to run this scan. Okay, and we get 22 results, and we're going to filter this out. You're obviously going to get more results if you set your closing prices higher or lower. And so let's go ahead and look at AS&D first. And we see there's a significant downtrend. However, we do see there's that uptrend, right? So we are seeing that definitely over, I can't quite see all of the periods, but based on what we coded for the last 5 days or so, should have the max, like today's max should have beaten out those past 5 days max. And it does look like it has. So our other indicators show us that this is also, I mean, if we look at volume, if we zoom in, we can see that the volume is increasing. So that's a really good sign. Let's look at another stock. Let's look at, I think I saw TransUnion as an example. So curious to see that as well, TransUnion. And if we look here, we are seeing a hot RSI, but we can see that for sure the volume is strong. We're seeing that today's closing price is definitely beating out the max closing prices over the last 5 days starting yesterday. And so this is another good indicator. Let's look at one more example. And let's look at this semiconductor that's pretty popular right now since there's a shortage. We'll look at ACMR. And we can see as well there's a downtrend, right? And once that downtrend reversed, we can see that today's closing price has been better than the max price for the last 5 days. So, and we look at the volume has increased, and that does look like about 50%. So that's another good indicator. And this one isn't hot, so you actually might be catching it at a really good point. So I hope this was helpful. Make sure you're using your other indicators. And tomorrow we will look at another example of a pretty solid scan.